The sun hung low over the burning desert, casting a molten orange glow. Across the dunes as the wind dragged thin trails of sand along the empty road, where the world felt as though it had stopped breathing. Rancher Colt Maddox had been riding since dawn, tracking a stray Mustang herd that had wandered too close to the canyon ridge. But the sight that met him as he turned the bend froze him in the saddle. A little girl, no more than 7, sat in the sand, her tiny arms wrapped around a ragged doll as tears streaked down her dust-covered cheeks, and beside her lay the still form of a woman whose dress was torn, sun-bleached and lifeless. Colt felt the earth lurch beneath him, but he dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle the child, whose sobs cut through the eerie, quiet like broken glass. The girl looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes, clutching the doll so tightly her knuckles turned white. And though she trembled, she didn't back away. Instead, she placed one small hand protectively on the woman's shoulder, as if guarding a treasure that the world had already stolen. Colt knelt a few feet away, removing his hat in respect, his rough voice barely above a whisper as he asked her name. But the girl only shook her head, her lips trembling before she pointed at the woman. "My mama," she croaked, the words cracking like a dry twig. Colt sucked in a breath as the truth settled like a stone. In his chest, the woman had been gone for hours, maybe longer. Judging by the tracks, the pair had been traveling on foot, likely abandoned by someone who should have protected them. Colt scanned the barren horizon, anger tightening in his jaw. The desert was merciless, but humans could be worse. He moved slowly, offering the girl his canteen, and after a long hesitation she drank, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her voice was a whisper carried by the wind as she finally spoke. "She told me not to fall asleep. She said I had to stay awake, to watch her." The words stabbed Colt deeper than she could ever know, and for a moment he stared at the small figure of this child. The grit, the loyalty, the unbroken will to protect the only love she had left. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked softly. She swallowed hard, then murmured, "Lila." Colt nodded slowly. "Lila, I'm going to help you, all right?" But Lila shook her head fiercely, tears returning as she pressed both hands to her mother's arm. "I can't go. Mama said she'd wake up if I stayed." Colt felt something inside him crack, something he thought he'd buried years ago. He had known loss, brutal, unexpected loss, but never had he seen it sitting in the open desert guarded by a child, with more courage than most grown men. The sun dipped lower, and the air grew colder, and Colt knew staying out here another hour meant risking the girl's life. He rose slowly, walked to his horse, and returned with a blanket, draping it gently over the woman's body. Lila flinched but didn't resist. She seemed to understand that he was showing respect. Then he crouched in front of her, his voice firm but gentle. "Lila, you can't stay out here. Your mama—" His words broke and he cleared his throat. "She wouldn't want you to die out here too." At that, something shifted in the girl's expression. Not acceptance, not yet, but the first flicker of understanding. She let out a small, broken sob and leaned forward until Colt lifted her carefully into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Like a whisper the wind could carry away, and as he set her on his horse, he made a silent promise to himself. She wouldn't be another grave the desert swallowed. He turned back to the covered body and whispered a vow only the dying sun heard. "I'll take care of her. You have my word." When he climbed into the saddle behind Lila and nudged the horse forward, she looked back at the blanket-covered form until it disappeared from view. As the desert swallowed the last trace of the woman she loved, Lila let out a cry so raw that even the wind seemed to pause, and Colt tightened his arms around her, knowing that he had just stepped into a story that would change both of their lives forever. Colt Maddox rode through the dusky desert path with Lila trembling in front of him, and though the sun had set completely, the heat still clung to the air like a ghost refusing to leave. The journey back to his ranch was slow. For every few minutes, Lila would turn her head to look over her shoulder, as if hoping she might see her mother walking toward her, alive, smiling, calling her name. Colt said nothing. He knew grief was a language that needed space to be spoken. even if only inside one's own trembling heart. When the ranch lights finally glimmered in the distance, Lila tensed, clutching her doll to her chest again. The horse slowed near the gate, and Colt slid off first, reaching up to help her down. "This is home," he murmured, but Lila didn't answer. She stared up at the house as though unsure she was allowed to enter a place that still had light, warmth, and life. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and stew, and Colt's old hound lifted its head from the rug, tail thumping once before settling again. Lila's eyes widened, not in fear, but in that fragile curiosity children cling to even in sorrow. Colt poured her a bowl of warm stew, though she barely touched it, just pushed it around with her spoon silently. After a long while she whispered, "Is Mama cold now?" Colt felt his heart twist, and he knelt down to her level. "I'll take care of her tomorrow," he said solemnly. "I'll give her a resting place. A peaceful one." Lila looked up at him then, her blue eyes filled with a depth that didn't belong to a child. "Can I see her again?" The question hit him like a punch. He nodded gently. "Tomorrow morning, I promise." That seemed to calm her enough for the exhaustion to settle in her bones. Colt led her to the small guest room, though she refused to sleep on the bed. Instead, she curled up on the wooden floor, clutching her doll, too afraid, perhaps, of soft things that might vanish the moment she closed her eyes. Colt stayed by the door until her breathing steadied, and when he finally stepped outside into the night air, he let out a long breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He'd lived alone for years, too many years, maybe, and the quiet had once comforted him. But tonight it felt empty and cold. At sunrise, he saddled his horse and lifted Lila up behind him. They returned to the place where he had found her. Lila slid off the horse and walked to the blanket-covered form of her mother, kneeling beside her and pressing her forehead to the ground. Colt stepped back, giving her the moment she needed, and when she finally whispered goodbye, he felt something shift in the air, a soft sigh of acceptance. He buried the woman beneath the shade of a lone desert tree, marking the spot with a wooden cross he carved from a broken fence rail. Lila placed her doll's small cloth flower at the base of the grave before turning back to Colt. "Where do I go now?" she asked in a voice so fragile it nearly broke him. Colt stared at her for a long moment, the desert wind tugging at his coat, and then he crouched down so they were eye to eye. "You're coming with me, kid," he said softly but firmly. "You've got a place at the ranch. For as long as you want it." Lila blinked, unsure whether to believe him. "Even if I cry?" "Even then. Even if I break things? Even then. Even if I remember her every day." Colt swallowed the lump in his throat. "Especially then," Lila nodded slowly, stepping closer until her small hand slipped into his, trusting him the way only a child with no one left in the world can. Together, they mounted the horse and rode toward the ranch, the wind at their backs, the sun rising warm and full over the desert as if blessing the fragile new beginning forming between them. Colt didn't know what the future held. Raising a child was a journey with no map, but as he felt Lila rest her head against his back, he made a silent vow to be the shield, the shelter, and the family she had been robbed of. And maybe, just maybe, in saving her, he would save something inside himself too. When they reached the ranch gates, Lila looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mama can see me from there, right?" Colt nodded. "She can see you and she's proud of you." Lila smiled, a small, trembling smile, but a real one, and the rancher knew that hope, fragile as it was, had taken root. And that was enough for now.